Chiro Hustle. Sit back and learn from the greatest influencers in the profession on the world's #1 chiropractic podcast. Before we dive into this powerful episode, please remember to subscribe to our channels and to give us a 5-star rating on iTunes to continue hustling. This episode is sponsored by Imaging Services, Chiro Health USA, Chiro Moguls, Pure Chiro Notes, Titronics, Sherman College of Chiropractic, New Patients in a Box, the Influencer Authority Podcast Training, Mango Voice, Life Chiropractic College West, and M-Sculpt. Let's hustle.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 498 of the Chiro Hustle podcast. I'm your producer, Luke Millette, and here's your host, James Chester.
So today we had the opportunity of interviewing Dr. Linn Erickson. And if you want to hear a story about dreaming big, but acting bigger, stay tuned. Welcome back. This is another episode of the Chiro Hustle podcast. Today I have Linn Erickson coming on with me. Super pumped to do this episode. I've been interacting with Linn over the past couple months. I met him at an event out in Philadelphia with Dean DePice and Jen DePice at TLC. Wonderful group. If you guys are looking for a great group to be a part of, check out TLC. But before we get into this episode, I'm going to let you guys know the big why. Why do we do what we do over here at Chiro Hustle? Freedom of speech, First Amendment. It's important to us. Family health freedom. It's important to us. Medical freedom. It's important to us. It should be important to you guys too. And then we'll go more philosophically for chiropractic. We do protect BJ Palmer's Sacred Trust. If you don't know what that is, go to your favorite search engine immediately, pause the show, and go and check out BJ Palmer's last words. You're going to know more about chiropractic than you ever did before that, and you'll have more of an understanding of chiropractic philosophy. Then we do support subluxation-based chiropractic. Sometimes people are like, why do you say that? Well, because a lot of the profession is losing its way, and we have to at least let people know what chiropractic is and the tenets of chiropractic, the lexicon of chiropractic. And then lastly, we believe in innate intelligence and universal intelligence, that when man or woman, the physical get adjusted, it connects them to man or woman, the spiritual. And with that being said, Dr. Linn Erickson, welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much, James, for having me on for this. I'm really looking forward to it. As we were talking about, I found out who you were through my wife first, and then some other sources too. And as I've learned more about it, you're doing something very good and very unique here. And I'm privileged to be part of it. I am.
Yeah, it's a time capsule for the profession. And like you said, there's been some people that have come and gone that we didn't get their stories the right way. And we didn't capture like their messages, and we didn't capture the big idea coming out of their mouth. And I think that that's a cool thing, is we've woven this tapestry of chiropractic together with the story of chiropractic, the truth of chiropractic. And we do that through amazing people that support. I always, when I talk, I say, we stand on the shoulders of giants. And are you going to become the next giant for people to stand on your shoulders?
It's awesome, James. I just had that principle reinforced to me from a CA, actually, believe it or not, in the group with the DePices. We have a bunch of ways to work on training for your team to receive people well when they come into your office and see that being done, hear that being done. And we just heard that one of the CAs who was recorded has passed on. She was battling cancer for almost 4 years. And when we heard that, there was certainly, that sense of a moment of silence here for somebody who served the profession so well. And then to think that, had somebody not pressed record and captured her doing that, we would have lost those words forever. But somebody took that time to press record, or in some cases, pick up a pen and record something for posterity. That's extremely important, because this profession will only be one generation from extinction if we don't do stuff like that.
Yeah. And, I really believe that the heart comes out when we think about preserving the message and preserving somebody's likeness. And that's something that this has done really, really well over the past, 5.5 years. But I want to more focus today on you, Dr. Linn Erickson, the chiropractor. And I have a bunch of great questions I want to get to today. If we don't get to them all, no problem, but we'll decide on what's important as we go through the interview process. But your chiropractic story, I don't know it personally. You shared a little bit about your background with me as we've gotten to know each other, but what inspired you to get into chiropractic? And maybe you could share that with our audience today, because your friends, your family, your colleagues, students that have trained with you, and your patients, they're all going to be curious as to hearing this episode once it comes out. So why don't you reintroduce yourself to everyone?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Dr. Linn Erickson. I'm a chiropractor of now 31 years, I believe, and yeah, still doing it. It's still fun. It's still exciting every day to come into the office. And I always think when I do my gratitude card to start the day, I think about I have this day to make a difference for every person that I get a chance to do. In fact, my vision statement is that I live and love to bring hope and healing to every person that I teach and touch. That's what it comes down to. Is I want to instill that hope that life can be better on all different through the chiropractic model and principles. And so that was not something I grew up with, though. So I grew up in Lincoln, Nebraska, Midwestern town, and had two great parents and a younger sister. My mom, and I would say to some degree my dad, both had a pretty natural view of life. My dad had grown up on a farm, and he, saw the cycle of life and did things to cooperate with nature and so forth. And my mom grew up in a family that I think had those kind of views too. And so I just remember that, caring for our health was kind of part of our life in terms of just trying to eat as healthy as possible. My mom subscribed to at least 2 or 3 different magazines that regarding natural health and so forth, but chiropractic wasn't part of that. We had lots of nutritional stuff. In fact, if we actually started getting sick in some way, the first thought was, what can we do for this naturally? So vitamin C, zinc, rest, things like that. And only did I really set foot in my pediatrician's office was my annual physical. And then, if we actually really had it going bad. But I just think the mindset of, hey, trust the body, do that first, made a lot of sense to me. And so when I was about, I'm going to say about 7 years old, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. And so I saw the medical model kind of being superimposed into her life now. And lots of things that were being done that were pretty harmful in some ways. They definitely were doing their best to save her life. But, we've come a long ways in that regard. And even now, I think medicine's doing a better job in some ways of not creating all the collateral damage from things. But I saw just her health going down, the rounds of chemo, the surgeries, and so forth. And so, a very pivotal year for me was age 16. I was a sophomore in high school, and so I had sustained a pretty significant low back progressive injury playing basketball. Quite a story how that happened and things. But I just remember, from that whole experience, well, in the middle of it, I was hardly able to bend over and tie my shoes in the morning. I feel like I'm moving around like I'm, 85 years old, and practice was out of the question. And I was like, man, what do I do here? And, all things that, you would typically think like, well, medicate it, rest it, ice it into those things were, I did a little bit of that stuff, but I was like, this is not getting anywhere. And so I was very blessed to actually have Rick Rohrs, who I'll give tribute to for getting me into the profession on a human level. He came to Lincoln, Nebraska, and he had been open not very long, and said, I'm willing to take care of the athletes from your high school at my expense so I can see what different sports tend to have different types of injuries and so like that. And so going to a chiropractor, I had some rough idea what they did, but I'm like, man, I just know I can't go on like this. There's no way I'm going to be able to even finish this season. And lo and behold, I went there, and he took films of my spine and showed me. He says, you have these subluxations and so forth. And the thing I kind of remember sticking with me, James, was just that regarding a blockage, that there's interference in the normal expression of health or life kind of things. I don't know if you used the light switch analogy or with me or what, but something stuck. And I guess you could say I got chiropractic intellectually and maybe philosophically in my heart before I even got my first adjustment. It was like, that just makes sense. All I knew was I went to see him pretty regularly and intensely, and within a month's time, I'm back playing basketball pain-free. In fact, I had probably my best improvement as an athlete between that year and my next year, just because things were working so much better. There's a lot of stuff we have now in terms of data and hard science that shows why that is. But back then, I just knew it was, man, I'm doing better, I'm quicker, I'm faster, and I'm not in pain anymore. This is fantastic. Well, that same year, I lost my mom to cancer, her 9-year battle with breast cancer. And so when that dust kind of settled from that, I'm into my next year in school, healthcare was still kind of as a possible career there for me. But I just remember thinking, like, I wouldn't want to do what happened to my mom's body to patients. And that just seemed like, I know they're doing their best what they're trained to do, but I wouldn't be able to do that sort of thing. It just didn't seem congruent with me. And the things I looked at, like dentistry and so forth, really didn't have a lot of appeal. So I said, well, chiropractic just seems to be the one thing left standing. So I hear a lot of doctors talk about how they didn't choose chiropractic chose them. that was kind of like that moment for me, I guess you could say. And so when I went into undergrad, I started taking classes towards that. There were some struggles, and the student got through it all and what have you. And then, yeah, lo and behold, I ended up going to Palmer College from 1988 to 1992. Had I would say my experience there was with some of the last great dinosaurs that you've referred to, James. You know, the people who actually wrote books, and you know, good heavens, people like Fred Barge and Vern Pierce, and I had for philosophy had Virgil Strang. These people, if they weren't jailed for practicing medicine, practicing medicine without a license as chiropractic in different states, they knew the people who were and probably went and visited them and supported them. And so they'd been through it, and their conviction was like through the roof. I mean, as solid as you could be. They knew that chiropractic was the gift to the human population, to the world, for natural healthcare and God's healthcare profession. And so to hear them speak was incredible. They would come in and talk to us once a trimester, and you could not help but be, I guess you could say, shored up when you kind of get mired in all those, you know, basic sciences in the first couple of years of school. Like, yeah, that's what we're working towards. And so I was very blessed to have those folks, and then graduated in '92 and have been practicing ever since.
You know, you said a lot of stuff there, and I love that you're so honest about, you know, how you got into the profession. I got into the profession similar. I was 16 years old, got an injury playing high school football. My athletic trainer said, "Hey, you should go get some x-rays of your shoulder over at Palmer College." I went over to Palmer, and I was 16, so my mom had to go with me. And my mom went in and they said, "Hey, can we take x-rays of his spine too? We need to check and see if he's got any subluxations." And the true story. And at that point, I always knew that I played better as an athlete when I was getting adjusted. And I didn't come from an affluent background. Like my mom, like worked for every dollar, like really hard that she made. But she always set money aside to make sure that she had money to send me to the chiropractor either before or after a game, like every game I played going forward. And it was pretty amazing because my performance improved too. And I think if anybody's out there listening to this episode and they're like, well, what's the power of chiropractic? And I started working in an office when I was 30. So that was 16 years later. And the doc asked me if I'd come help him work in his office. And I said, "Bro, I don't know anything about chiropractic, but when I get adjusted, I feel better." He said, "That's good enough." And that's how this whole thing with me started 15 years ago, working in chiropractic. And I think that we can all look back on those early stage stories of how we became influenced and what it did to us. And a lot of times when people come to your office, they don't need to know what a submarine is or a subluxation.
That's right.
You know, they need to know that the doctor cares, that they acknowledge what's going on, that they ask them good questions, and that they want to help that person, you know, improve their activities of daily living and have a better quality of life quotient. And I think that that's what made me fall in love so much with chiropractic. And then, you know, getting a chance to actually meet the profession, like actually like sit knee to knee with chiropractors, that's what really like made me so inspired to do the work that I do. So listening to your story, there's a lot of connection with both of us of how we stepped into chiropractic. But you know, the second part of that first question is what makes you unique in the space? And I see you're sitting in an x-ray room. And
Yeah.
I know you've done some studies with chiropractic biophysics. So maybe we can
Yeah.
talk a little bit about chiropractic biophysics and why x-ray is important in chiropractic.
Yeah, sure. I know you had wanted me to do this interview at home, James. I just couldn't work that out today, but this is the quietest place I have in my office. So I'm in here, door closed, and nobody's going to barge in here. So I don't think. So in chiropractic college, James, I was very fortunate to. I guess you had that instilled in me that it's a philosophy, a science, and an art, right? And so those three things are like a triangle, makes for a very stable tripod, if you want to call it that. And you want to make sure that you keep those things all strong and don't err on the side of getting too strong on one without forgetting the other, because certainly some aspects of our profession have done that. And the sad thing I see so often is they want to leave the philosophy behind because they think that's old, that's done with, whatever like this. When actually that's how the profession started. And it just really made for what it is today. That's kind of stemmed from that. It was observational first, like I see things going on. Then Dee has his experience after magnetic healing to take care of Harvey Lillard and realizes wow, I'd worked on this guy's spine and he got his hearing back. And of course, he thinks he found a cure for deafness. There's lots of causes for it. But anyway, he found definitely one there. And so from that empirical side came this. And so the philosophy was there. And then, of course, the art of how to do it better. So when I was about halfway through my education, I just remember thinking to myself, like, I'm learning a lot of great different techniques in chiropractic college, and they're really good. I just wish I could find some sort of unifying principle that would put them all together in one. Like, when would you use this technique, or when would you use that one? And a lot of times it comes down to doctor preference, what they've had good results with in their own personal health care and so forth. A lot of times it has to do with the patient. But I just remember at one point, I was invited to a talk on posture. And I thought, this sounds pretty good to me. I'd like to go see this, because somebody actually has this model for the spine that seems to be, that would be important. Like, if dentistry stands for one thing nowadays, we know it stands for dental hygiene. Yes, they still fill cavities. Yes, they still do root canals. Yes, they still do partials and dentures and what have you. But they're really known for being the people actually who are concerned with dental hygiene and health. And so I thought, well, the chiropractors should probably be interested in posture. It sounds pretty good to me. And then I started going to the club, the Chiropractic Biophysics Club, which was a very open format like what you have here, James. And I just remember them going over these papers. And I was like, wow, that makes sense to me. Like you can't get around the fact that we live in a physical world and we need to have something that helps us resist this gravitational load and protect our nervous system. And if there's ideals for things like vision, 20/20, and ideal for blood pressure, 120 or 80 or somewhere like that, there's probably some sort of ideal for the human spine to be. So very early on, James, I wasn't even quite in the clinic yet. I heard Don Harrison come to school. He gave a talk, and it was very funny because if you ever knew the man, he didn't have the best, shall we say, politically savvy delivery. He just told it like it was, and very brusquely. And at one point, we saw the room getting thinner in terms of attendance stuff. When he got to the best stuff, he said, hey, look, here's the thing. This postural model, it may not be perfect, but it's a nice start, because we do live in this physical world, and it has, your spine has to resist gravity and protect your nervous system. And in this position, it gives a very good chance for that to happen. And you just look how it's designed from front to back. There's a column that's for rigid strength. From the side view, it has these curves that allow us to bend and move and absorb shock to some degree. And so it's this engineering marvel. So he just said, basically, I don't care what technique you do. You can use a drop table, you can use an instrument, you can use your hands. These may not be terms that a patient might know, but it's what you see chiropractors do when they adjust patients. It's all I care is that you just, when the person's done what you did, that you move their posture closer to normal. And then for those things that support the spine, like ligaments, which don't have the ability to be actively moved, let's do some stretching for those things that are commonly called traction, and do some exercises that are geared towards what is called the mirror image. So if you actually have a head shift to one side, you're going to move it to the opposite way, and it's the exact opposite, not just a tilt when you have a shift or whatever. You have to do the exact mirror image. And I just thought, man, this doesn't make sense. So that kind of became my model. And so as I look at my different techniques I learned in school, I can actually use all of these, regardless of what the person presents with, as long as they tolerate it well. And number two, I'm really correcting their posture if that's the type of care that they want. And so like you and I, James, said, our experience with care was we went in for symptomatic relief of something, and then we discovered this whole world of chiropractic. Same thing's true of our patients today. They perceive, often because traditional medicine has failed them or they're just naturally wired, this is a place I need to go for some type of relief from a symptom. And when they come in, if we teach it right over the course of 1, 2, 3 days initially, and then over just kind of drip education throughout their experience in our office, they realize there's all this stuff that chiropractic can actually influence. It doesn't mean that we're treating any of those things, but when you're talking about the central nervous system, you're talking about the entire body being influenced by care, from the rooter to the tutor, from head to toe, however you want to call it. And so it doesn't mean that we're treating asthma or treating anything like that, but we are definitely influencing the nerves that control those functions directly or indirectly. And that's why we see these amazing stories, commonly called miracles by people. We just simply say it's the body learning how to work better by retraining the nervous system to work better. And so that for me is, so everything that we do, James, here, for those patients that choose this type of care, is to make sure we assess them initially to see how their posture looks from the outside and then on the inside. Because now when I have an x-ray, I can measure and quantify how far from normal you are. And then for those who want to, they always have that option to do simply do relief care, but the vast majority of our patients will choose, doc, I don't want to feel better. I don't want this coming back. I want to make sure my body's going to last for as many years as God gives me. If I'm going to be on the floor at 80, sitting cross-legged with my grandkids reading books, I have to have my body with me. Let's correct this problem. And it's so rewarding, James, to be able to show them pre and post. I'd say to people, it's very much like when a person steps on a scale and they've been losing weight and they've hit their goal weight, or they just see they dropped their first 50 pounds. When a person sees their post x-ray and says, holy cow, look how hard I work and look at that, they know that I'm feeling better and I'm functioning better And it's so rewarding. So.
You've made it to Chiro Hustle. Sit back and learn from the greatest influencers in the profession on the world's #1 chiropractic podcast. This episode is sponsored by Imaging Services, Chiro Health USA, Chiro Moguls, Pure Chiro Notes, Titronics, Sherman College of Chiropractic, New Patients in a Box, the Influencer Authority Podcast Training, Mango Voice, Life Chiropractic College West, and M-Sculpt. Let's hustle. You know, I'm going to step in and say a couple big words for people out there is proprioception. And when you give somebody their posture back, it builds their balance back, which builds their confidence back, which has a long-term effect on people. And then chiropractors that do chiropractic biophysics, it does neuromuscular re-education. And it re-educates the body on how to function properly with its motor skills and all the good stuff that makes people have longevity and vitality. And those are a lot of the things that people really don't understand. But the part that I think hits home is when we talk about vital lung capacity and what a curve in the spine does for vital lung capacity. So anybody I'll meet and they have something to say about chiropractic, I just want to ask them always like, hey, put your head out and take a deep breath, breathe in as hard as you can and like hold that breath in. And how does it feel? Now take your head back, put it over your shoulders, take the same deep breath. And how did that one feel? And I say, well, that's what the power of chiropractic is. It supports that vital effect of how you breathe and how you function. That's just one of the things, but it's pretty important, right? And
it's huge.
Yeah. And that goes back to BJ Palmer's big idea. And one small thing for one person can be a big effect on a family, a community. And I really believe that that's why chiropractic is so important. And everybody under the sun, it doesn't matter what their acronym is after their name. If it's an MD, if it's an osteopath, they're going to get adjusted, man. And they all want to have that vitality too. And they all want to have that better quality of life. So, you know, I think that's and the dentist, those people get adjusted too. And I think that that's just it, is anybody that wants to have a better quality of life long-term, they see a chiropractor.
You bet. James, it's interesting you mentioned proprioception. For those who are listening, if there's patients out there, that's a big word, but it basically just means body awareness. You have positional sense about where you're at in space. In school, we all learned the 5 senses, right? We say I can see, smell, hear, touch, and taste. Your nervous system is a lot more than that. Those are the 5 special senses, but proprioception is the ability to know, like, for example, my head's above my hand's above my head, even though my eyes are closed, because these things are firing off in all my joints and my skin and so forth. When you are subluxated, those things don't work as well. Your body awareness isn't as good. And so they've actually shown that when you have distorted posture, you're more likely to fall. There was, James, one study I think you're familiar with, where they showed that people who are walking around with their head more than 2 inches in front of their hips, especially as seniors, they're way more likely to fall, they're way more likely to break a hip, and they're way more likely to die in the next 10 years or 5 years, whatever it was, just because their body position is off. And there's an article from over 60 years ago that JAMA, I think, it put out, where the doctors were observing that it's really interesting. We find these people actually have these really like hunched backs, mid backs, that we commonly call thoracic hyperkyphosis, or how you typically think of as a grandma aging, right? That sort of dowager's hump. We've observed that these people tend to have reduced lung capacity, their hearts struggle. They often have digestive issues because of the pressure of the rib cage on their internal organs. Women tend to have their uterus prolapse, and if they get an infection, they're 44% more likely, like a lung infection, like say bronchitis or pneumonia. They're almost 50% more likely to die just because they can't get stuff out and in, right? I mean, that's just body position that does that stuff. Nothing to do with back pain, nothing to do with headaches or neck pain. That those are things that was like life quality and life longevity.
Yeah.
Huge stuff.
Well, I like this conversation today. And nowadays everybody's into biohacking, and I go to biohacking conferences, and I've interviewed a lot of people that are out there doing different stuff. And I go, do you guys know what the original biohack was? It was chiropractic. And chiropractic was the original like part that people were looking for, that edge of betterment of life. And you know, you talk about like posture and what it does to the internal organs, and posture of what it does to breathing. and posture, how it makes people like less capable and less vital as they age. Like they're more susceptible to slips and falls. And the other part of that is grip strength. If you have strong
Yeah.
grip and strong grip strength long term, your capacity to take one of those slip and falls and not to crumble and break is a lot better off too. So anybody that's listening, I would recommend everybody get stronger with your grip as you age, because you can tell vitality in somebody by how well they shake your hand. The grip strength of somebody, if they fall, they'll roll through a fall rather than collapsing and breaking. And that could be
Right.
a wrist, an arm, a
Mm.
shoulder, a hip, whatever it might be. But your ability to like sustain something, if you have a chiropractic lifestyle long term and you're stronger, you're just harder to kill.
Mm. Yeah. And I think as James, it's great you go to those conferences because everybody would like to have that sort of that advantage, right? And I think you'll continue to see as scientific progress goes and people do research, there are certain, nutrients or ways we take them or ways of exercising that give you an advantage over just doing certainly none of those things or old ways of doing them, if you will. But man, those things are just a specific area. When you talk about influencing the nervous system, it's the entire body. Because Gray's Anatomy says it, right? First few pages. It is the system which controls and coordinates and harmonizes every other system in the body, either directly or indirectly. There's nothing else that can do that, to my knowledge. I mean, if they discover someday, there it is. But it's what God put in place to run the whole thing. And so if that's working well, and then you add to it these lifestyle factors, like how you exercise well and how you eat well and how you manage your stress well and rest well and all those things like that, man, you have the perfect 1-2 punch. Talk about grip strength, 1-2 punch to stay healthy. I don't know if you're familiar, James. Did you see Curtis Fedorchuk's article on the telomeres aging? So
I'm familiar with Curtis. I saw him speak at that conference we were at, and he's a
yeah,
great guy.
so he's a chiropractor in practice. To say his article real quick, he's the first guy to show that chiropractic has an anti-aging effect at a cellular level. They had a patient they were taking care of who had quite a few health issues. She had been in an accident, things like this, and she actually had that classic hunched posture. She had a forward head shift, so these are two whammies, and a loss of curve in her neck. And they took care of her through a typical chiropractic biophysics program and made some amazing changes with regards to her posture, her pain levels. She did amazingly well. But what they did in the study is they took a measurement of her. There's a way to actually see how your telomeres, which are the things that are end of your DNA, that actually help repair your DNA as it gets injured from just the stress of life, oxidative stress and things like that too. And what we know is those telomeres start to go away the more stressors you have in your life. You're actually aging. You'll see it, of course, externally in people's faces and stuff, aging very fast, things like that. But in this case, they took the measurement of what those were, and what was amazing was, oh, by the way, the faster they go away, you're aging faster. The slower they go away through lifestyle, that means you're aging very well. In this case, I think I'm recording this study right. When she was finished with her first 3 months of care, her telomeres were actually approximately 8% longer. In other words, they were starting to grow back because she wasn't depleting those things because of her stress on her nervous system and things too. No other changes in her life, no changes in diet, no changes in exercise. So that to me is like, okay, we are talking about anti-aging medicine now. Chiropractic isn't just about feeling better and getting range of motion. It can do that. That was our first experience. It can actually help people with these various organic and systemic complaints. Absolutely. But if you want to be around for a nice long time and actually know who you are and be able to do things in your world, you would do well to take care of your nervous system your entire life.
I think as we go on, Dr. Linn, as people are going to find out that their spine is more important than they ever gave it credit for. But before I get on to a couple more things, I know we're almost at the end of our interview today, but I just wanted to make a quick statement that you gave me an epiphany moment. And I do believe, and maybe some people might fight me on this, or they could if they want to, but I think that Don Harrison was the Steve Jobs of chiropractic. And I think that he pushed the agenda so hard for people to understand this model that Deed is carrying on, and the family in chiropractic biophysics is carrying on at idealspine.com. I think there's been a lot that he has birthed because of his unwillingness to become what the popular demand wanted. Like you said, he was a straight to the point guy. He showed up, he told people. He wasn't always popular, but we can't always look for the applause. We have to sometimes go and do the work, whether anybody's clapping for us or not. And I think that that's one of the most important things I look back on. That ideal spine model that he designed was something that is pushing chiropractic not only fundamentally to a better position, but structurally to a better position. And I think that if everybody got out and they discovered what the chiropractic biophysics team was doing based on their research that supports every aspect of chiropractic, they would find a whole different purpose in what they were doing when they check, detect, and correct vertebral subluxation. And they'd have a whole lot more ability to show up and say, this is why I support Curtis Fedorchak's paper. This is why I support Deed Harrison's paper. This is why I support Evan Katz's paper. And they would have a whole lot more purpose as to why they were doing what they were doing for the clinics that they were running.
Amen. I think we realized probably, 10 or 20 years ago that our profession on a shoestring budget in most cases has turned out a ton of good research. And we know that for virtually any complaint that people might think of seeing a chiropractor for, so we kind of started there, like, the musculoskeletal things and stuff like that, that chiropractic gets people better faster with no side effects and cheaper than virtually anything that's on the other side. Now we're getting into things where we're seeing, like, are we changing physiology? Yes. And now some of the most recent research that Deed has done has been on asymptomatic people. And they're showing, look, we can measure real time what happens when people get their posture back. And the one that to me is most encouraging is that a person who actually has worked really hard to get their posture taken care of and corrected as best they can, and is tested at the beginning of care and then within a year's time, will typically find that the messages that get from their brain to their body and body back to their brain are traveling between 20 to 25% stronger and faster than they were a year ago. And again, that's anti-aging medicine. What do most people say about so-and-so? Haven't seen him in years. How's he doing? Oh, he's slowing down. He's not doing as much. The people I hang around, the chiropractors I know, they're doing amazing stuff no matter what ages they are. And so what's cool is so are their patients. And so it's really exciting to me.
It's vitality. Chiropractic gives vitality to people. So when there was a big fight years ago about mechanistic versus vitalistic camps, vitalistic always wins because all we want to do is have a better quality of life. And I think that that's a part where an argument just gets shut down immediately. If you want a better quality of life, you go see the chiropractor. If you want a better quality of life, you have a better functioning nervous system. And I think that that's a part where we have to go back to, like, what you just said and what I just said. I just spoke to a group out in South Carolina, the Palmetto State Association, and they asked me what a national ad campaign should be. And I said, well, get better faster. And they said, well, that's too symptomatic. I go, well, if we don't start speaking a similar language across the board, then it's not going to work, guys. So we needed to decide something. And they're like, well, why would you say that? I go, well, the best national ad campaign I ever heard was by Phil Knight of Nike. And it was just do it. And get better faster resonates with people. Everybody wants to get better faster. And that's where we're at today in 2023. We're at an age where people just want to get better faster. And I know we're at the edge of our time together today, but I want to ask you one closing question.
Sure.
If you could go back to, what year was it? 1992, and talk to yourself back then, that would have changed the trajectory of the future of your career. What would you have told yourself?
Oh, man. One is dream big and then act big. That for me would be it. I got to say, James, despite having that great experience in education, people I learned, I think my vision for what could happen in the chiropractic office was shaped largely by, the people that I had known and had seen and stuff like that too. And they were doing great stuff like that. I just remember my first experience when I went in to practice at a satellite office for a group, that I didn't have that kind of coaching and vision building. I learned a lot of training. I knew how to run an office pretty well, but as far as, like, how do we serve the masses in a good way, that wasn't necessarily part of that. And so I got that experience by somebody else you've interviewed, Ben Lerner, and a bunch of great docs that were in that group. I'll shout out to them. I just was thinking about them. Dan Yochter, Paul Storchi, Eric Lerner, Tony Nalda. These are some amazing people. They were in a group with 5 offices in Central Florida, and I got the vision there. We were doing it at one point where I think we were the second busiest family practice in the country, and probably as a group served more people than anybody did. And just all in that philosophy of, God, you send us the people that we can help take care of, and we'll do the best we can for them. And this entire family is getting better. That was incredible. And so I would want to have that vision. I would want to have every person who wants that for their own life have that coming out of school, and get that experience and just see what's possible. And then if you choose to stay there, fantastic. If you choose to go on and do your own thing, hopefully you'll never shrink back down to a size that is comfortable, or what you thought chiropractic could be.
Well, Dr. Linn Erickson, I appreciate you being on today with me at episode 498. Is there anything I didn't ask you that you were itching to discuss with our audience today before we call it a day?
Well, I just wrote down some names, James. I just wanted to say this because all of us stand on the shoulders of the people who came before, or that we're currently working side by side. And so again, Dr. Rick Rohrs, my initial chiropractor, Victor Strang, I got my first green book with his and just really taught me the philosophy of chiropractic. My clinician, Gary Krakos, taught me to think laterally, like just thinking always about what we do for people. Donna Deed Harrison, for sure. Some of the folks that are currently doing CBP so well, Joe Ferrantelli, Don Meyer, Jason Yeager, Sean Lasco. These are incredible people. And then from a mentoring standpoint, Doctors Dean and Jen DePice have been instrumental in that. And then, some of my colleagues like Paul Fernhaber and Steve Newbern, these are people I go to with great stuff. I just know so many docs. I'm so blessed. I just checked. I think I have about 2,000 people on my phone, James, on my Rolodex there, and I bet half or more of them actually have DC behind their name. And so I'm very blessed to know them, including the honorary DC I'm talking to right now.
well, the most important person is your wife for putting us in touch with each other. So I want to thank her. And I want to thank her for having the belief in what I'm doing to introduce us to each other. So big shout out to my wife.
My wife, Brenda, my daughter, Karis, and my son, Ezra. I have to come home from work every day and make sure that I'm living what I say is important to me in front of them. And they know Dad tries to do that. It's not perfect, but I'm big on integrity. So.
Well, Dr. Linn, I appreciate you being on our show today. And if people want to reach out to you or learn more about you, where can we send them to?
Yeah. So our website is www.turningpointe, and Pointe has an E after it, Chiro, @gmail.com. And that usually gets us to anywhere a person wants to go. We're also on Facebook too. We haven't quite modernized to some of the other social media platforms, but we hope to this year.
Well, great. Thank you so much for sharing the message of dream big and act big with chiropractic. And just look forward to the next time we get a chance to connect. And why don't you have a great day out there in Nebraska?
Yes, I hope it's sooner than later, James. Thanks so much.
All right. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, brother.
All right. Thanks for listening to Chiro Hustle. Don't forget to subscribe and check back next week to continue hustling.